How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and this is my channel Deck Ready, where I talk about everything related to the Steam Deck and other gaming handhelds. Whether you've been here before or this is your first time on the channel, I'd really appreciate a subscription. I'm trying to get to 50K. That's my goal right now. Help me get there if you like the channel. All right, so I've got a good list of topics for this video. One of them is whether or not you should be really worried about your Steam Deck OLED burning in. The next story is all about Valve fixing a ton of games with the new Proton release. Then we'll get a quick update on Metal Gear Solid, and we'll wrap everything up talking about the ROG Ally 2. And that one's not a leak. Asus is already talking about it. Yeah, I don't know why either. All right, so this first news story, once again, is all about burn in on the Steam Deck OLED. And it's coming from my new friend, Carrie, over at the Phawx. I had a blast talking to this dude on the Nerd Nest podcast. Now, that's scary on the outset, but you have to keep in mind that he basically made an application to stress the hell out of the Steam Deck, for lack of a better word. Like, it was running with max brightness, max HDR, like the worst case scenario possible. And that's what caused it to burn in so quick. And if you don't want this to happen as quickly as it could, he recommends running the brightness a little bit lower, like leaving auto brightness on should help, or just making sure you're always a little bit under max brightness. And when you're using HDR, make sure it's not maxed out all of the time. But I feel like the Steam Deck kind of lends itself well to a situation like this, because I don't think a lot of people are sitting on their Steam Deck for hundreds of hours at a time, right? Like, you're not going to sit there from 8 in the morning until 7 at night playing on your Steam Deck. Theoretically, you have a better gaming PC or a PS5 or a Series X, and when you want to do some serious gaming on the couch, especially with a bigger game like, I don't know, Dragon's Dogma 2 that's coming up, or Baldur's Gate 3, that's something that you might want to play for an extended period of time on your PS5 or your bigger gaming PC. But I play SnowRunner a lot on my Steam Deck, and thinking about all the stuff that stays on the screen made me a little bit nervous. Thankfully, again, there are avenues to fix this, like the one I just mentioned of running that full screen YouTube video, which you can access just by going over to the desktop mode, going to YouTube, and then running it in full screen. But realistically, you probably won't experience this issue as fast as he did, because the Steam Deck OLED comes equipped with a pretty quick screen off time. Even when you're downloading games, like after a few minutes, like maybe 2 or 3, the Steam Deck knows you're just leaving it sitting there downloading a game, and unfortunately it can't fully turn the screen off and continue to download games. I don't know why that is. I think it's related to Linux versus Windows or something like that, but because of that, it just dims the screen as much as possible. So that's really going to help. And while there are a lot of games that support HDR natively on PC, HDR has never really become ubiquitous on PC the same way it has with consoles. So even then, there aren't that many games where you're going to be playing at HDR all the time, and even then you're not really going to need full brightness unless you're playing like outside or in a super bright room. But for me, I'm usually playing in the dark. Like, the maximum light I have is like 2 desk lamps and that Halloween lamp behind me. There's another lamp across the room, and this is primarily where I play my Steam Deck. So I'm personally not too worried about this affecting me. But just for like comparison's sake, it took around 3,600 hours for the Switch OLED to burn in. So 750, that's a very dramatically lower number of hours it would take on the Steam Deck. Now, the silver lining here, of course, is that this is Valve we're talking about, and I've been covering the Steam Deck since before it came out, and I can't tell you how many times I've done a news story like this here on the channel, and I've talked about a problem on the Steam Deck, and before I even post the video, Valve has either said they're working on a fix or they already have one out and ready to go. Like with the Monster Hunter Rise DRM story last week, by the time I even sat down to make the video, I checked on my Steam Deck while I was recording, and there was already a Proton hotfix ready to go that fixed that DRM issue that was stopping the game from launching. So obviously Valve is really interested in HDR. Pierre was tweeting about it for a long time before it eventually came to the Steam Deck. I'm sure that even without this video from the Phawx, they were already working on some solution, and basically what that would be is like a user-initiated screen cleaning or something like that. But again, because it's a PC, there are other avenues you can take. So I don't think you really have to be too worried about this. Just conscious of it, right? Like, take care of your stuff. Don't abuse your stuff, and generally speaking, things will work out just fine. So yeah, I highly recommend going over to Carrie's channel and watching the whole video, because not only are you going to get a better explanation because he's the one doing the test, but this dude just operates on a whole nother level. Like, when I was on Nerd Nest talking to him, just the way he talks about technology makes it not only super easy to understand with deep subjects, but every time I feel like I learn something when this dude starts talking. So yeah, again, I highly recommend recommend going and checking out the video over on the Phawx channel. But realistically, something to keep in mind, but not something I think anyone needs to be too worried about. Just my 2 cents. But yeah, speaking of Valve and quick fixes, let's move on to the second news story, which is a new update for Proton. They're on version 8.0-5, and what this one brings along with it is not only HDR for a ton of games, but also some fixes for games that just straight up weren't working on the Steam Deck. I'm just gonna go through some of the highlights on this list. If you want to see the full list of fixes, head over to Pierre's Twitter. He tweets everything related to Steam Deck updates, big or small. I highly recommend following him. The first thing that really stood out to me is that Assassin's Creed Mirage is fixed on the Steam Deck, and the reason that stood out to me is because A, it's a Ubisoft game, so you have to deal with their launcher, which really sucks, but B, that game is not available on Steam. It's only available on the Epic Game Store or through UbiPlay. So them going out of their way to make sure a game works that they really can't make any money on because it's not even available on Steam, I just think that's something that's really cool. They've always been good about that, so it's like praising them for something I've already praised them for before, but I feel like we got to bring it up when they do this to let them know that it doesn't go unnoticed. And Assassin's Creed Mirage, like, I thought that game was not going to perform well at all at launch, just because even though it was theoretically like going back to the roots of Assassin's Creed, it really felt like a quick conversion of the Valhalla engine, so everything kind of looked and felt like Valhalla from all the previews. But this game sold extremely well, and it's a game that runs really well on the Steam Deck, just like Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So yeah, it's cool to see them going and fixing that game. A lot of people are going to be happy that Baldur's Gate 3 got a fix. It was having some startup issues where it would crash once in a while when you're starting the game up. They've said they fixed that, so that's good. Forza Horizon 5 once again works on the Steam Deck. I don't know how long it didn't work, because ever since the deck launched, this was like a game that by the hour seemed to work or not work depending on some minor change to either the game or the Steam Deck OLED. So yeah, that one should be working as of the time of recording this video, but if it's not, don't be surprised, because this game has problems every other day. Just in time for the new update for Halo Infinite, they fixed crashing in that game. That was a really welcome change, because if you haven't played Infinite in a while, it has gotten really good. The December season was awesome. The new season they have brings in armor cores from Halo Wars, which I know people really wanted, like the Mark IV set. I am going to jump back in and grind. And if you've never tried Halo Infinite on the Steam Deck, don't be scared off by all the settings videos running at low settings. Low settings looks really good on this game because they just optimized it really well, and it runs really well on the Steam Deck. You can get a lock 60 out of this game in multiplayer when you're using the lower settings, and they still look really good. You might see some slowdowns in Firefight, but that's still not really an experience I recommend on the deck, because you need to be on your toes in that mode. It is hard. They also fixed some issues in Cyberpunk 2077. They fixed the multiplayer in Dirt Rally. There's a lot of fixes in this update, but another thing it brought along, or it might have come in a previous update, but it's kind of packaged in here as well, is HDR support for all of the Resident Evil games. So yeah, HDR is really good on Resident Evil. They did do a patch when the next gen versions of those games came out that added in ray tracing, and it basically destroyed every single Resident Evil game for some reason, and they eventually ended up just taking the ray tracing out. So Resident Evil 2 Remake is basically the best it's ever been on Steam Deck, especially with HDR. If you've never experienced that game with HDR, I highly recommend a playthrough. If you're into that game like I am, like you've completed it a countless number of times, you can get through it in one sitting, and it's just a good palate cleanser. It's a great survival horror experience, probably the best one of all time. I know that's crazy to say, but I've never experienced a game like Resident Evil 2 Remake. The vast majority of these changes have been available for a minute. They're coming from Proton Hotfix, so if you've been running Hotfix, you already have them, but if you're someone like me who on your Steam Deck OLED, you want to keep everything as clean and official as possible, and you're just running the current version of Proton, you'll be happy to know that if you've been experiencing issues with pretty much any game lately, they're going to be fixed with this new Proton update, and you probably already have it because Steam updates Proton whenever it wants. Seriously, it's weird. It's like the only thing that downloads while I'm playing games, and I'm like, wait, is it downloading new updates? Oh, okay, it's just Proton Hotfix or Proton Experimental or Proton Regular branch. One thing I gotta say, Valve seems to have slowed down on the feature updates for the Steam Deck, and even if you go check out the Steam Deck Twitter, it's been pretty quiet lately. Me and Rich, fan of the deck, we were talking about this on Discord, trying to figure out why things have been a little quiet, and then we remembered that Valve right around now every year takes the entire company on an all expenses paid trip to Hawaii, and usually right before that they drop a big update. So if it hasn't happened yet, I would assume that around February or March is when the trip is happening, and we'll get some feature filled update right before that trip happens. months. Still, it's nice to see all of this continued support from Valve. I know that going into the Steam Deck back at the beginning, people were really worried about Valve time, where they say they're fixing things and it just takes an indiscriminately long amount of time, but that is definitely not something you can criticize them for when it comes to fixing games. I mean, once again, just a week ago, we got a fix for Monster Hunter Rise within minutes of it crashing on the Steam Deck, which, you know, the response time is really good there. And that brings us to the quick third news story, which is the opposite. It's not Valve fixing a game on the Steam Deck that arguably should have been supported at launch. It's Konami. They're coming in, they're fixing Metal Gear Solid Master Collection Volume 1. This collection has been a mess since it came out. I didn't buy it at launch because I wasn't going to pay $60 for something that didn't work, with the hope that it would eventually work, but it went on sale during the Christmas sale, and there were fixes at that point that allowed all the games in the collection to work. So I grabbed it then. It was still a little bit messy for my taste, but Konami just updated the Metal Gear Master Collection to make sure that it gets Steam Deck support. Now, I haven't seen any reports of anyone going in and trying this, and I don't actually have them downloaded on my Steam Deck right now, but I'll give them a shot and let you guys know in a future video if they worked, or if you've tried them out, make sure you let me know down in the comments below, because people check to see if a game is running or not. I'm personally getting really excited for the Master Collection Volume 2. I hope they actually put some more time into it and take what they learned about the launch of the Master Collection Volume 1 and actually apply it to this new version so that it doesn't have as many issues, specifically on the Steam Deck at launch. Even on regular PCs, the Master Collection was not great at launch, but it's really exciting for a few reasons. First of all, my favorite of the Metal Gear Solid games, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, that one will definitely be included in this Master Collection Volume 2, and that one has never been available on PC. Unfortunately, they never ported it over, and it runs and looks really good if you emulate the PSP version, which is probably what they're going to do with the actual official release. But what I'm hoping they turn on is online multiplayer, because if you didn't know, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker is basically like the Metal Gear take on Monster Hunter, and just something about playing a Monster Hunter game with guns speaks to me at a different level than playing a Monster Hunter game with swords. It's also going to be the first appearance of Metal Gear Solid 4 on any console except the PlayStation 3, which, if you're someone who's heavily invested in the Metal Gear Solid story, the gameplay, in my opinion, leaves a little bit to be desired. It's a little too linear, a little too easy, but man, the story in Metal Gear Solid 4 is like for the ages. It hits so hard, and even me, someone who's not super into anime or super Japanese stuff, it's just so cool. Like, by the time you get to Metal Gear Solid 4 after playing through all the story of all the games, it's like the ultimate conclusion that you always wanted. So it's going to be really exciting to have that game over on PC. And that brings us to the fourth and final news story this week, which is ROG Ally news. So the first thing we should talk about is that there's a new update for the ROG Ally that adds frame generation. Now, frame generation is always a contentious topic here on the channel because everyone seems to understand it differently. So the simplest way I can describe it is like, if you're running a game at 60 FPS, what the frame generation technology does is it uses artificial intelligence to generate new frames, which effectively, if everything is working right, should double your frame rate. And this is coming clutch in huge games on PC like Cyberpunk 2077 or Starfield, where it had to be added in with a mod at launch. And that was really good because it allowed you to run the game over 60 FPS. The big drawback is that when you use frame generation, it introduces a lot of input lag if you're running at lower frame rates. So that kind of brings us to the ROG Ally. I don't really know how effective it's going to be in a lot of the games where you would really want it, because the input frame rate from something like Starfield is going to be so low that using frame generation would really introduce a lot of input lag. But with that being said, it is cool to see the technology supported on these devices, because that really gives them an edge over the Steam Deck, because the Steam Deck does not have frame generation and probably won't get it through any official means. But there are mods you can get for games like Hogwarts Legacy, Cyberpunk, or Starfield that allow you to use it. There are issues where it ruins some aspects of the game, but I've saw in the comments that when I talk about this, people say they really do like the mod in Hogwarts Legacy. And as someone who tried that game out multiple times on the deck and was never satisfied with performance, that could be a game where I would theoretically try out the mod. But regardless, it's available now on the ROG Ally, so that's cool. And the next update around the ROG Ally is that Asus kind of screwed up, in my opinion, and just like weirdly announced that the ROG Ally 2 is coming this year. This is coming from Asus India's vice president, so a higher up person at the company, and what he said is we most likely will launch a second generation this year. So yeah, that's pretty cut and dry. But the reason I think this was a mistake is because if they line up the release dates, right, like a full year after the ROG Ally came out, we're not going to see that until the middle or the beginning of this summer. So there's still like 3 or 4 months in between now and then where people who want to get into into handheld PC gaming and don't want to pick up a Steam Deck, like they want the power of the Z1 Extreme, they could go out and buy an ROG Ally. But if I was someone who was interested in it, I would not buy one right now. I would just wait till the ROG Ally 2 comes out, because even though there might be a slight price increase, you're probably going to get the features that people have been asking for, like a bigger screen, a thinner chassis, and maybe even an OLED panel. Still, it is pretty exciting to hear that they are doing an ROG Ally 2, just because I don't think this thing is selling all that well, and I don't think the Legion Go is either. Like, if you compare the Steam Deck to these Windows handhelds, the Steam Deck is running laps in terms of hardware sales around all of these products, and I think there's two big reasons for that. The first one being that these are both first gen products, and people are usually pretty nervous to show up for first gen. Like, a lot of people are smart to wait for second gen because all of the issues with hardware and software are really ironed out. The second big problem, I think, is that a lot of these devices run Windows, and even though we all know how to use Windows because we grew up learning in elementary school and everything like that, and a lot of us are PC gamers, transitioning it down to like a 6, 7, or 8-inch screen, even if you have joystick mouse control or a little trackpad like in the case of the Legion Go, it's never really as easy or good as you want it to be. Thankfully, we know Windows is working on some sort of handheld branch that's going to be navigatable by the D-pad and the joysticks and the face buttons, which is great, but that isn't really materialized yet. So right now, if you pick up one of these PC handhelds, the experience is really rough unless you're using something like Steam Big Picture mode, which basically, for lack of a better term, just transitions over the Steam Deck OS to your Windows screen and runs it as a little bit of a wrapper. And what this has resulted in is a lot of returns to Best Buy. Like, I was at Best Buy the other day picking up a gear shift for my G923 racing wheel, and I went over to the ROG Ally section, and the way I was able to find it is just by listening, because it's always on there. They have it running with the screen always on, and so the fan is loud as fuck. You can hear it literally the second you walk into the door. So I followed my ears to the loud fan on the way back of the PC section, and it's not even front and center. It's like hidden in the back of an aisle, and the whole little glass case under it was full of the open box red tag Best Buy boxes that you can get there, which is great because if you want to get into this, you can get them for as low as like $500 now, which is awesome. But yeah, a lot of people are returning their ROG Allies, which is not a good sign for that product. So knowing that, it's good to know that Asus isn't giving up as quick as I think a lot of other people thought they might on this new venture that they have with the ROG Ally platform. It looks like it's here to stay, but I feel like if the ROG Ally 2 comes out and sells as poorly or worse than the original ROG Ally, that's when we'll have to start worrying about the Windows handheld sort of fork of handheld gaming kind of being in some trouble. But yeah, that's all I've got for you in this week's update. Make sure you let me know what you think in the comments below. Remember to subscribe, set your notifications to all if you haven't already. And as always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.